أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
पनाह मांगता हूँ अल्लाह की शैतान मरदूद से।
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
अल्लाह के नाम से जो रहमान और रहीम है।
औज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश्शैतानिर्रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन वस्सलातु वस्सलामु अला रसूलिही खातिबिन नबीयीन व आलिहि तय्यिबिन ताहिरीन अल-मअसूमीन अल-मासूमीन। अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। Brothers and sisters of Islam, welcome to this program of Faith Forum. Whilst coming to the studio, I was listening, or rather watching the news, the sad news that just yesterday in the cities of Baghdad and Basra, more than 59 or 60 or more people were killed and hundreds injured in the sectarian violence that has been, would I say, endemic in that region, and innocent lives of all women, children, men have been lost because of the sectarian divide that has engulfed the region. To discuss this problem, whether this vast type of violence, of religion hatred and bigotism amongst people, is it just a Muslim phenomenon or is it a global phenomenon? Is it something that can be controlled, curtailed, stopped, eradicated, or is it something in this modern age of science and learning, of rockets and the enormous progress the world has made in technology? Is it spreading not only amongst the Muslims, especially of the region, the Islamic world, or is it becoming a global phenomenon? To discuss this topic, I have the comfort of the presence of our learned scholar and my brother here, Sheikh Amin Evans. Brother, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you very much for once again participating in this program of Faith Forum.
Wa alaikum salam. It's always a pleasure to be here, Dr. Saad.
Thank you. The pleasure of talking is one thing, but the saddened atmosphere that engulfs the Muslim world, the Arab world, the Islamic nation, all the way, even if you look at the islands in Philippines and Indonesia, if you cross over to the south of Thailand and again into Burma, Myanmar as it is called now, whether it's Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Iraq, or Lebanon, or Bahrain, whatever, the whole Gulf of all the nations of the North African region are all engulfed in one thing: sectarian violence. Is it a violence that is like a disease or an illness of the soul of the Muslim world, or is it a phenomenon that has no respect of a religion or color, caste or creed, is the question that I would like to talk to you and discuss with you, and for you to enlighten me and the audience.
I don't think we can simply see it as a Muslim issue. The phenomena of the global spread of violent movements isn't unique to Islam. If we look at, say, the late 50s, early 60s, there was an upsurge of right-wing racist politics in Britain and the US. There were riots in the city of Birmingham in 60, 61. I was a child. And these spread. And what we get is that when there's a violent ideology being propagated, violent individuals and groups within society will join onto it to give their violent urges a rationale. The killer will be a killer, whether he's a Conservative or a Labour Party supporter, whether he's a Muslim or a Christian. We're seeing a particular focus on what occurs in Muslim communities, even though they're very diverse in terms of their national identities, their cultures, their means of producing wealth, etc. So at present we're seeing this identification as being a Muslim issue, but that masks a far bigger problem for civilized societies, whatever their faith.
It is, brother, it is the civilized society we look at. If we look at the sectarian violence which took place, you mentioned America, right? It is because of a sense of superiority and the inferiority of the opponents or the opposite side. It is the sense of belief of righteousness on one side and the work of the devil and the inferiority of the other side makes them. If you look at in those early years that you mentioned, an organization called KKK, Ku Klux Klan, which even exists even to these days, which talks about the superiority of the color, of the color of the skin of the white American against the black Afro-Americans. And to say that the superiority existed and violence took place till even in the not too long a distance when Martin Luther King and his followers said enough is enough. There cannot be segregation on behalf of sectarian divide, and they took up the challenge. If you look at that episode of history then, when a country which boasts itself that we stand for the rights of the people of the whole world, we are not just a power, a superpower. How can it allow such a divide, a sectarian divide, to exist in its own land even today?
The forces of these feelings aren't generated intellectually, and so they're very difficult to control by law and reason. I'm always reminded of the Latin poet Martial, who had a very naughty sense of humour, must be said. He was forced to commit suicide for one of his jokes. But he observed of the animals in the arena, and he said, the tiger does not become savage until we bring it into civilization. And we're seeing an effect of society. And one of the big drivers of any form of violence in society is wealth differentials. If we look at America and Britain over the last couple of decades, we've seen a widening differential between the rich and the poor. And the aspirations of the poor are no different to the aspirations of the rich. This causes dissatisfaction. And when you have dissatisfied people, you can encourage them towards acts of violence, disobedience and unlawfulness. If we look back to London last year, we saw, or the year before, we saw political parties' offices smashed and looted, a big encampment on the forecourt of a church, all these things. Now, these weren't driven by a particular religious or moral ideology. These were just people who were very unhappy at not being able to live the sort of lives that they believe they deserve. We could go to Pakistan. Somebody said to me where the differential used to be that sort of 15 or 20% of the people were reasonably well off. Going back after 10, 15 years, he found that only 5% of the people are well off, but they are more well off than the 20% used to be. And the poor people are even poorer. This is a recipe for violence and social unrest. If we look at the early Islamic laws introduced in the Quran and by the Prophet, peace be upon him, we see measures to reduce wealth differentials, khums, zakat, inheritance laws, all designed to keep wealth distributed and a reasonable difference between wealth and poverty. In fact, trying to exclude poverty. It's recognised that our problem starts when people become unhappy and dissatisfied. And therefore we need not to send drones to target certain areas. We need a much broader solution. We need to spread the ointment of employment and personal comfort, prosperity, rather than keep saying we can destroy this evil, we can identify it. We can identify it, but it's not in a particular ideology and it's not in a particular town, village or country. It's a social disease and it needs social solutions.
Samain, our Sheikh here says it's a social disease. It's a disease within the society itself, and it is not the society which is responsible, it's the leadership. If we look at what happened for a few hundred years in South Africa, where the white populace of South Africa thought, the Afrikaners thought that God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has made them superior by giving them a fairer skin, and therefore they had the right to rule the rest of the black Africans. And that led to sectarian divide there. This time not so much of religion but of superiority of color and creed. That led to segregation of the whites and the black. That led into the ghettos for the black and the rich suburbs of the rich. And as brother says, the causative factor is the divide, the gulf, the chasm between the haves and the have-nots, between the rich and the poor, between the hungry and those who have surplus to eat and throw away. And brother says, Islam came for this very purpose, to break that wall, to knock those barriers, to knock those divides and create a harmonious society. A harmonious society Whereas, I mean, if we look at this modern world, the West, which cherishes that we are the supreme of culture, superiority, right? What happened during the Second World War was again between one race claiming to be superior than the other, and under that ideology, an excuse to start a war. Is it possible that we can do away with that mental makeup and attitude even in this modern world and day and age?
We can certainly oppose such attitudes with rationality and justice as our guides. But if we look at the Second World War, was there a great wealth differential leading up to it? We have to say, yes, there was, and it was imposed by some of the most severe reparations imaginable that stripped Germany after the First World War of its wealth, its land, and totally of its national dignity. The reparations were designed to destroy the German spirit, to humble them and disgrace them for daring to challenge British and French imperialism. The upshot of that was millions of dissatisfied people, and they fought a civil war, first of all, between the forces of the right, the Freikorps, and the Spartacus League-led communist forces. And it resulted in a government composed almost totally of dissatisfied, small-minded men who were out to destroy anyone they could blame for their hardship. And of course they turned first of all to the Jewish community, who they saw as a privileged class. And we're seeing overall far more about the difference between being privileged and being disadvantaged than we are about a simple racial war there. Race is added to the mix to rationalise the need for this warfare. And we see this in many regions. The particular tribal characteristics are associated with a superior lifestyle, a privileged lifestyle. We saw this amongst the Hutu and the Tutsi, all Africans, but one slightly lighter skinned than the other tribe. Good enough reason to kill people. So we're seeing this constant repetition of the social problem. How we combat that is, of course, we discredit the theories used to rationalise it. Actually calling them theories is giving them more credibility than they deserve. They're old wives' tales about racial superiorities. And we have to work actively to do whatever we can ourselves to reduce the effects of social disadvantage. And we see this in the mosque. And Hajj, we're all supposed to look the same, not because it looks pretty or nicely uniform, but because nobody then feels disadvantaged. We've all got the same, and it reminds us that whether we're rich or we're not rich, we're still greatly blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with life, with family, with our knowledge. And we don't really have to be spending all our time eating our own hearts. If it's haram to eat a brother's back, what is it to eat your own heart? It's horrendous. We have great gifts, great blessings. And if we are content and pleased with what we've got, then we've always got something to give to people who haven't got enough, genuinely haven't got enough, to raise them up on the scale of this difference, to reduce that gap for them. So there's something that every believer can do to combat these forces that sectarians and racists feed upon.
The evil of the sectarian violence, and as our brother here explains, it is not just a Muslim phenomenon, but it can appear anywhere. As we pointed out, if we take the example in Africa of Tutsi and Hutu tribes, or if we see the genocide committed in Cambodia with a political tune there rather than religious, where the superiority of those who were educated class was considered dangerous to the society. So wherever a group of people find threatened, they want to take up, if not with dialogue, but with weapons, and the weapon of hatred is worst of them on the opponent's side. We saw that happening in the genocide in Cambodia. We saw a similar thing with the pretext of religion even a few years ago in the Balkans, in amongst the countries there. What were they? The Bosnians and the Serbs.
Yeah, the former Yugoslavia.
For the former Yugoslavia. But, Brother Amin, let me ask you, our very prophet, the great prophet of Islam, saw the sectarian divide that existed in Arabia between tribes, one superiority claiming over the other. And it was a magnificent achievement, an almost impossible achievement with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He brought that sectarian divide to what you call zero level, so that he had Bilal, his Habshi, sitting with him, and Abu Sufyan and Abu Jahl, the great tribal leaders there as well, on equal basis. With that great teaching, why has Islam, or not Islam I would say, my apology, why has the Muslim world fallen into the gutters of this divide, that yesterday more than 60, 70 lives were lost just in the two cities of Baghdad and Basra?
It's our pride. Pride can be a great thing for man, when we do a good and we feel a satisfaction. But we can also feel a pride in things that we shouldn't, in our greatness or our rightness. And this is what occurs in these things. You get somebody who hasn't really got anything to be proud of, and they suddenly become somebody in an organisation. They become a go-lighter in the SA or the SS. Only a small rank, but instead of just being a nobody on a street corner, they've got a uniform, they've got a purpose. And in the same way, some of the forces that claim to be Islamic have taken their goal, not of salvation, but of power in this world. And they become the little concentration camp commanders, the sergeants and the corporals, shouting orders at a few less fortunate people. And so there's this pride. And within this, Islam becomes an accessory. And the Muslim identity is something that also I am. First of all, I'm some sort of violent creature, man of power, and I'm also a Muslim, where really to be the front should be I'm a Muslim, And what does a Muslim do? He seeks salvation for himself and those near to him. He's not obliged to go out and conquer vast tracts of territory or compel people to behave the way he does. So again, it's this pride, this false pride, believing you've become a power in the world that is greater than the example that the Prophet, peace be upon him, gave us of smoothing obstacles between people, opening doorways, letting light into the society, all the sort of things that we admire, but are difficult for some people to do because they crave a position in the world.
A very important factor to realize, as Brother pointed out here, that it is a sense not so much of guilt, but in a way of inferiority in our minds that we take the revenge out to here there. Let me show you, if perhaps we are ready, a clips of what happened in very recent years in the continent or the Western world, part of it, which boasts of itself of superiority, where religion has been banished from the state, by the state, and a pride that we are all equal still did not stop the evil of sectarian violence taking place in the Balkans, in the former Yugoslavia.
Spell. 49,000 Muslims lived in Svornik. None remain. 5 centuries of Islamic life and culture there were erased. This is ethnic cleansing. It became routine as the Serbs took control of 3/4 of Bosnia's territory. In time, they learnt to keep the cameras out, but ethnic cleansing continued.
Ja ne mogu da kažem da toga nigde nije bilo. To je nekada više organizovano ovdje.
How sad. The words beautifully chosen, ethnic cleansing, as if there was dirt, guilt or filth in being Muslim, that the Serb had to come and clean that land of the Muslim living in that part of the world. Were they cleansing the land where the Bosnian Muslims lived, or were they in fact putting filth and dirt in their own faith and belief that by doing this they will become closer to their God, to their religion, to their followers, to their leaders, and will be able to maintain superiority of their culture and creed as they prided themselves in the Balkans?
There really seems to be a vast amount of rational thought. There are certainly slogans that, God wants this, these aren't God's people, etc. But we see the same sort of attitude occurring in team games where there is no great intellectual theory. Suddenly people will react as a mass very badly over an incident in a football match. And all afterwards they'll say, oh, that's not like them. They're not like that in real life. But in fact, it is real life. And in real life, groups of people do that if they're in activities and positions where they feel aggrieved and disadvantaged. What are they actually cleansing? It's an interesting question. We have a concept of purity, but we don't really know what purity is.
And who the Puritans are.
Or the pure. Stephen Fry said something funny on TV, that the Pilgrim Fathers didn't actually go to America to escape persecution. They went there so that they could be in charge and persecute others. And this is actually true, that they wanted to impose their view on people. And quite often, what is called pure is agreeing with the people in power. You may be the filthiest of acts, but you're a pure member of that society. When what we aspire to in Islam is a moral and ethical purity.
MashaAllah.
There is
the purity of the nafs, of the soul.
Of the soul and of the intellect, I would say, and the actions. We separate these things for our convenience so that we can hold images in our head, but man is the totality of these things. And so the purity doesn't stop with the soul or with the nafs. It spreads into the body. And of course, if we take this process in reverse, in the wudu, we're not really trying to scrub our hands clean. We're making a statement of spiritual purity, the desire for spiritual purity. And so the body, the mind, and the soul come into a pure unity, and as such are fit to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance and support. We see that the people involved in these violences bathe in impurity. However much they dress the righteousness of their cause, we see that they rape, they murder children. And just the other day we've all seen a man eating another man's heart. They dig up the dead and desecrate graves. All filthy acts committed by bodies. And it shows that what they call a purity is actually an impurity of soul, mind and body.
The Quran says in chapter 6, verse 159, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, as for those who divide their religion and break up into sects, you have no part of them in the least. Their affair is with Allah. He will, in the end, tell them the truth of all they did, which is at the time of judgment. Let me show you what I showed you about the European or the Serbian superiority of being a Puritan Christian or whatever. Let me show you what Saddam did. Let's have a look at our own backyard and see what we did.
It was said that some of the Republican Guard tanks had come into Kerbala bearing placards saying no more Shia after today. At the shrine itself, they gave full vent to their anti-Shia feelings. The cedarwood doors were left splintered on their hinges as the guards smashed their way through to get at those inside. In the great mosque itself, even the names of the Shia imams were machine-gunned, murdered in the Middle Ages, killed again by Saddam. Few could have survived such a hail of bullets. In the makeshift hospital, only debris remained.
Samain, you saw the clips of what happened between the Muslims and the Christians, the Serbs and the Bosnians in the heart of Europe. And we thought it was not a Muslim phenomenon, but you just saw the clips of what Saddam, his tanks, his cronies, his power, his might, his guns and his tanks did in Karbala. It is said there were thousands of people within the shrine of Abu Abdullah, Hazrat Imam Hussain al-Islam, who had taken shelter there. Do you know? Not one came out to tell the tragedy, what happened inside there by the hands of Saddam and his people. How sad that whilst we have the great, voice, loud voice to condemn the Serbs for their brutality, how sad that the Muslims and the Muslim world did nothing to speak out against Saddam. He was dined and wined and hosted by each and every Arab nation. He was not only the darling of the West, he was also the darling of the Muslim world, especially the Arab world, with the tanks and guns shooting at the dome and the doors of the shrine, right? That was a sectarian violence where there was a big banner written right across the front of the tank, from tomorrow there will be no Shia in Karbala. There is one Hussain, the mighty Hussain. It is not Imam Hussain, it is Saddam Hussain. Isn't that the message ringing today at the shrines or the Sahaba's graves in Syria and other places of the Muslim world today, Brother Amin?
I think it's very much that message. The verse of Quran you read, it shows us clearly the Muslim action, that the decision on difference between different opinions in Islam is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He'll be the judge of who's right and who's wrong. Critically, in that verse, it speaks of those who differ in their religion and break away. It's not about being different. It's that point when you say, only my interpretation is right, the rest of you are wrong. That is farq. That's breaking away from the deen. There were always differences of opinion in Islam. People used to come to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to Imam Ali alayhi salam, and for some sort of answer to all the caliphs. There were always divisions, but they didn't break away from the deen. They didn't break the bonds of brotherhood. Now I know people say that sometimes they did. And of course, and they broke order and became kufra millah. We're talking about breaking away from the belief in Islam being one ummah. I grew up with brothers. We used to fight, we used to hate each other, but we never stopped being brothers. We never divorced. We couldn't divorce. We were connected by blood as surely as Muslims are connected by the love of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the divine message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In breaking away from your brothers in Islam, it's the same as spitting on the Quran. It's the same as throwing it in a cupboard and saying, that doesn't apply to me. I am above that. I am above Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I should add an astaghfirullah to that. It's an abominable state, and yet people convince themselves of the rightness of such an attitude. To say that we are above the clear word of Quran and Sunnah. Not just arguing with scholars, and we're used to people who can't read Arabic at all, or have no textual interpretation skills or training, arguing over what something means. We're used to it. We don't go around killing people because they don't understand what they're talking about. We don't hit people because they come up and say things like, what kind of a scholar are you, etc. We forgive them as best we can. And that's the duty of a Muslim, to say, you know, he's out of order, but he's my brother. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will sort him out. These people who sort of go, oh, Allah hasn't done anything yet, I'd better kill somebody. Who do they think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is? If he wanted, he could tell us who is right and who is wrong in absolute terms. And he could sweep them all away like he swept away the armies of Fir'aun. We all know he can do that. We all believe he can do that. Except for those people who are out declaring themselves to be the best of Muslims and slaughtering Muslims to prove it. They are worse than Bani Umayyah.
MashaAllah.
At least Bani Umayyah got some power out of it. All these people are going to get is more dissatisfaction, a poor life, and a dark, cold, horror-filled grave. And that's the least they'll get.
It's important. Samain, my brothers and sisters listening to this program, listen to what our Shaykh has said. Islam doesn't believe in individual, dictates or thoughts. Brother talks about brotherhood in Islam. And on that, let me show you what the Quran says. Surely, in chapter 21, verse 92 and 93, the Quran stresses, surely, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, surely this brotherhood of yours is a single brotherhood, and I am your Lord and cherisher. Therefore, serve me and no other. But they broke their religion into sects among them. Yet, they will all return to us one day. This is the message that, as Brother Amin here points out, by doing just the opposite of Allah's wish, they will find nothing in the end but a cold grave, darkness of the grave. I believe there's a caller on the line. Let me, if you allow, Brother Amin, I can take this call. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Who is it speaking, and please, and from where?
Sir, I am Mr. Salman from Gilgit, Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. Go ahead. What do you want to say? What would you like to say?
I want to ask from both scholars that if we compare Muslim countries with the European countries, we found a difference that what we have in our Muslim countries, we haven't in European countries. What is the reason between the difference between the two countries?
Okay. Thank you. Would you like to make a comment on that, Brother Amin?
Yes. Many of the things we're seeing throughout the world, we have seen in European countries. We, I think, grew tired of the killing, because as soon as you kill the people you accuse of heresy in one generation, the next generation arrives and you've got another set of heretics, or the heretics have taken power and they're killing your people. At the time of, say, Queen Elizabeth I, people were being burned one year for being a Catholic, and the next year they were burned for being a Protestant. And then following the English Civil War, and everything is settling down again, the Church of England decided to throw out or exclude a load of ministers that wouldn't agree to the Book of Common Prayer. The wars in Germany continued right up until the First World War, sectarian and religious wars, and there's still strong religious differences there. I think we've we've learned mechanisms to control this. We respect the law, and I think that's something that has to be accepted, not just by the criminals, but by ordinary people, that law matters. It doesn't need a big stick or a gun. Just a policeman saying to you, "What are you doing?" And you go, "Oh, what am I doing?" That respect for law. The philosopher Hegel put forward the idea that our greatest freedom, expression of freedom, can only occur in civilized society, and it's civilized, educated men submitting to the rule of law. We all think freedom is having no laws. He looked at it the other way and said, actually, my free choice is to submit to the law voluntarily.
MashaAllah.
And we think of hadith, that the most loved of Allah is the free love, the love of a free man,
MashaAllah.
the free submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Law must be seen to be central to Islam, and the people submit to it not because they're frightened of the police, the army, or the political thugs. They submit to law because they are free men and want to live in peace with other free men. That is the lesson that we have to spread, and that's the lesson that Europe shed centuries of blood to finally say we are free enough now to live in peace, at least most of the time.
The brother from Pakistan who just spoke on telephone a few minutes ago about the sectarian violence which takes place or took place in Europe and taking place in Asia. Let me give you a very short taste of not too long ago what did in reality happen in the heart of Europe.
There were over 9 million Jews living in Europe. By 1945, only 3 million remained. During the course of 12 years, Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, would discriminate, relocate, apprehend, imprison, and ultimately murder 6 million people.
In a very short period of time, I'm not one of those who deny Holocaust. I say it did happen. For a family which lost its father, children or mother, for that family, it is a Holocaust. It doesn't depend whether the other million outside died in that family or not. For that family, when it was destroyed, when the military police kicked the doors in, right, in the heart of Baghdad, after the Saddam was gone and shot dead, father, mother, children, sisters, brothers, and one that survived, for that one who survived, the rest of the dead, it is a Holocaust. I don't care whether you say 1 million has to be killed for it to be named Holocaust. What goes to the causes the suffering and pains to the heart, that is a Holocaust. And that happened in the time of Saddam, and that happened after the Saddam. What you saw of cleansing a sectarian violence against the Jews in Germany, that is not untrue. It is a true fact of history, and I am not here to sit down to deny or question it. For any Jewish family that lost its wives and children and family, for that family, it was a Holocaust. I'm not counting the numbers, whether it's hundreds or millions. I'm counting what it did to a simple human soul and its suffering. And Islam is against it, as Brother Amin says, for in the name of Allah, let us wake up. And let us wake up to the fact that divisions of thoughts, divisions of our feelings and actions will be there will always be there. In one family, as brother says, he has so many brothers and sisters in his family, but they never divorced each other. They still remain brothers and sisters, even with different views. Brothers and sisters with different view. Can we not do so? What is happening in Syria, what is happening in Bahrain, what is happening in the heart of the house where Allah's house, Kaaba, is in the heart of Arabia, what is happening in Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, or even in Nigeria, even then are we so blind that after each episode we wake up tomorrow still to commit the same mistake?
You know, when ignorant or evil men take control of a country, the location doesn't really matter. Pre-war Germany, or Germany from through the 19th century up until the 1930s, was one of the most cultured nations in Europe. You know, it's the nation of Beethoven and Schiller, of great radical thinkers like Marx, Engels, great engineers, great poets, great musicians, great painters. And suddenly, in this country that's so proud of the height that its culture has reached, we get bestiality unleashed. And it wasn't unleashed straight away onto the Jewish community. On top of those millions who died, there's a vast number. I won't quote a number because if I'm wrong, the complaints will flow in. But the first people to be persecuted were the mentally and physically disabled. You were sent to special hospitals, and they just didn't come back. Then naughty schoolboys and petty criminals disappeared in hospital, never seen again by their parents. All of these people, purely German. Not killing, identifying a foreign race within the people, just rejects. And nobody really said anything, they're a drain on society. Once you're used to killing a few people or standing by while a few moral or physical degenerates are killed, you can start killing the whole of society. In Islam, we've got if you kill one man, it's as if you've killed the whole of humanity. Let's think about that. If you kill one man, you can go, well, okay, I can kill the whole of humanity. And some people try it.
Sameen, brothers and sisters, thank you for watching this program. As Brother Amin says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us, O people, you are all my children. It is for me to decide who is wrong and who is right. I have chosen to judge you on the day of judgment. Do not judge your own brothers and sisters in your own lives and in your own time. Let us hope what brother says with the quotation that if you kill a single human being, an innocent person, you have killed the whole of mankind. Let us keep to that spirit. Let us keep to the spirit of brotherhood, where Ansar, a people living in Makkah, and Muhajir, those who migrated, Allah's great beloved Prophet took their hands and made them brothers. It was a beginning of brotherhood in Islam. Let that spirit be alive in our hearts and souls. Let us work towards it, that we do not open a grave or kill a person and eat his heart. Let us pray that in the Muslim Ummah will shower love and win hearts rather than eat hearts. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.